So as a lot of you guys know, I love looking back on NBA trades. There are some that are big wins and losses for particular teams, young guys that get put into the perfect situation in trades that directly lead to a team winning or losing a championship. But in today's video, I wanted to focus on some NBA trades that, looking back on them now, can only really elicit one reaction. Huh? These are trades that either because of the circumstances or the assets involved or a combination of both are just simply crazy when you look back on them now. So with that said, welcome back everybody. My name is Tucker and here is my list of 5 of the craziest trades in modern NBA history. Number 1, Serge Ibaka for Paul George. Kind of. For this one, we go back to June of 2016. Kevin Durant has not yet announced his decision to join the Golden State Warriors in free agency, and the Oklahoma City Thunder had decided that they wanted to make some moves to open up some cap space. So they sent Serge Ibaka, who was making over $12 million a year that season and was due for a new contract the following offseason, to Orlando for Ersan Ilyasova, Domantas Sabonis, and Victor Oladipo. And looking back on this deal now in 2020, that seems like a monster haul for Ibaka for Oklahoma City. Now, to be fair to Orlando, Ibaka was still just 25 and had led the league in blocks per game in back-to-back seasons a few years prior, and they were looking for a defensive-minded big to elevate their team and were willing to look past Ibaka's obviously slipping stats from the season before. Meanwhile, Oklahoma City shed some salary, didn't have to worry about Ibaka's impending free agency, and got a nice veteran frontcourt player, a forward that was just picked in the lottery, and a former second overall pick. However, after Durant left for Golden State a few weeks later, things changed for OKC. Oladipo was suddenly forced into being the second option offensively behind Russell Westbrook, while Sabonis had a strange rookie season in which he was basically just a glorified three-point specialist without the percentages to really qualify him for that role. Meanwhile, in Orlando, Ibaka was moved at the trade deadline for Terrence Ross and a first-round pick swap, a move that would eventually pay off for Toronto, with Ibaka being an important part of their 2019 championship team. So initially, this deal didn't work out great for either team. However, and this is what makes it a crazy trade, the following summer in 2017, Oladipo and Sabonis were once again traded, this time to Indiana in exchange for Paul George. And I can specifically remember when this news came through, I was looking at different articles trying to figure out what other compensation the Pacers got back for George, because even with his public desire to be traded, he had to be worth more than that in a trade, in my opinion, and I wasn't the only one that thought that way. But to add to the crazy factor, it actually worked out for both teams. Oladipo developed into an All-NBA player in Indiana, and Sabonis just earned an All-Star appearance this season as well, an unlikely outcome considering how poorly they were casted in Oklahoma City. Meanwhile, the Thunder had some success with George, but most notably flipped him this past offseason to the Clippers for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Danilo Gallinari, and about $1 million draft picks and pick swaps. So if you really want to follow the thread here, the Thunder traded Serge Ibaka for SGA, Gallinari, and all of those picks and pick swaps, while the Magic just got Terrence Ross and one pick swap out of Ibaka just a few months after trading for him in the first place. Number 2, Kyle Korver for a copy machine. Okay, so this one is not only crazy, but is also relevant to one of my recent videos in which I said that Kyle Korver was the steal of the 2003 NBA draft. In doing research for that video, I, of course, checked out Korver's basketball reference page. And under transactions, it says that after being selected 51st by the Nets, Korver's rights were sold to the 76ers, which in itself isn't all that interesting. However, Korver has since provided some more details to the story. Apparently, his rights were sold for $125,000 to cover his summer league entry fee, which is a thing, I guess, and then the leftover money was used to buy a copy machine. So essentially, Kyle Korver was traded for his fee to pay in the summer league and a copy machine, and now in 2020, with over 2,400 made threes and counting, Korver is still working in the league, which apparently can't be said for the copy machine. Now, this practice of selling the draft rights to a second-round player is not uncommon at all. The most recent, relatively significant one that I can recall was the Bulls selling the pick that became Jordan Bell to the Golden State Warriors, who ended up becoming a pretty good player for them in his rookie season at least. But the fact that we can trace the money for this so directly to a copy machine makes it a really funny trade, and I'm interested if you guys have any other instances of a player being essentially traded for another object, not necessarily another player player. But again, a pretty crazy trade throughout the history of the NBA. Number 3, Draymond Green for Dan Gadzuric and Brandan Wright. So Draymond Green is a player that I kind of feel like I need to make an entire video on because he had a really interesting and at times misunderstood career. But how the 3-time champion, 2-time All-NBA selection, and 1-time Defensive Player of the Year got to the Warriors in the first place is a crazy story in itself. Back in February of 2011, on the same day that the Nets traded for Deron Williams, they also traded for bench bigs Brandan Wright and Dan Gadzuric, sending Troy Murphy, whose contract will be bought out by the Warriors, and a 2012 second-round pick to Golden State. This was all part of a string of trades made by then Nets GM Billy King, in which he sent out the draft rights to a handful of players that would have made an incredible team on their own, including Damian Lillard, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and in this trade, Draymond Green. The pick landed at 35th overall in 2012, where the Warriors selected Green. Now, there's no guarantee that the Nets would have taken Green at that spot, especially considering their draft history with King as the GM, but looking back on it now, they essentially traded away Green, a player with all the accolades that I listed earlier, for some salary cap relief and 2 players that would go on to play a combined 30 games with the Nets. Number 4, Pau Gasol for basically nothing. Oh, and Marc Gasol. For this one, we go back to February of 2008. Pau Gasol has made it relatively clear to the Memphis Grizzlies that he would like to play elsewhere. He made the All-Star team in 2006 and had averaged over 17 points per game for all 6 seasons that he spent in Memphis to that point, and was generally considered one of the most skilled bigs in the league. As a result, it was assumed that the price for a Gasol trade would be pretty high. However, at the beginning of February, which is a few weeks before the trade deadline, the Grizzlies sent Gasol to the Lakers for a less than stellar package of Kwame Brown, Javaris Crittenton, Aaron McKie, 2 first-round picks, and the rights to Marc Gasol. Now, at the time, this was frustrating to people around the league, and they're still mad about it now, for 2 reasons. One, they didn't really know that the Grizzlies were willing to trade Pau and felt like for some reason they only talked to the Lakers, and 2, that they basically gave Pau away to a Lakers team that was a championship contender and would go on to win 2 titles with Gasol in 2009 and 2010. And for the most part, people were right about how bad the package was for Memphis, with one significant asset coming from the deal, Pau's brother, Marc. Now at this point, Marc hadn't played a single game in the NBA and was the 48th pick in the draft the year before. And as it turned out, he became a multiple-time All-NBA selection and a Defensive Player of the Year winner. But nobody thought that would be the case at the time of the Pau trade, not even Memphis, as evidenced by their decision to select center Hasheem Thabeet at 2nd overall ahead of James Harden and Steph Curry just a few months later in the 2009 NBA draft. And the fact that the trade looked so bad at the time that it actually turned out to be decent as a result of Pau's brother becoming a great player makes it one of the craziest trades in modern NBA history. Number 5, LeBron James and Chris Bosh traded to the Miami Heat. For 99% of NBA players, getting traded is simply inevitable. It's incredibly rare for a successful player to never get moved from one team to another without it being their decision. Even for all-time great players like Kobe Bryant and Dirk Nowitzki, who were both traded for on draft night, and Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett, who were both traded to the Nets in the same trade as past their prime players, getting traded at least once is all but a certainty, and that was also technically the case for LeBron James and Chris Bosh in 2010 as well. Now, to be clear, James and Bosh had both already decided to go to Miami via free agency, and the only reason they were traded was because there were some asset and salary cap advantages for both teams, similar to the Kevin Durant trade to the Nets this past offseason. So as a result of that, James and Bosh were technically swapped for a handful of future first and second round picks, the most notable of which was Toronto getting their own first round pick back from the Heat that they had originally sent to Miami in a previous trade, which ended up at 5th in 2011, where the Raptors selected Jonas Valanciunas with Klay Thompson and Kawhi Leonard both on the board. So even though the Heat assembling that big three in 2010 is often thought of as a free agency situation, it was actually, for James and Bosh at least, a pretty crazy trade scenario that technically got those guys to Miami. And yeah, there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. As always, if you have any suggestions for future videos, then be sure to leave those down in the comment section below. As I said at the beginning, my name is Tucker. Again, I thank you guys so much for watching. If you'd like to see any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.